Alright, wait, I think I'm getting ahead of myself here. I don't think we're quite ready for 2001 just yet, even though I led you to believe so in the last part. 2001 saw the Game Boy Color release of the third The World Is Not Enough adaptation, but as I mentioned toward the end of that part, yeah, I skipped over a game there. I had my reasons. But let's dial it back a little here and take you back. The new millennium. Times are a-changin'. There's a new decade, and EA Games had plans for a non-The World Is Not Enough game. In regards to what was going on in the Bond film franchise at the time, well, they were still at the point between Pierce Brosnan's third and fourth entry with The World Is Not Enough in 1999 and Die Another Day in 2002. Not too much else was going on at the time. I mean, Austin Powers sort of helped to repopularize the series with the second film, The Spy Who Shagged Me in 1999, although maybe not with the most positive repopularizing. Daniel Craig has recently stated that the Bond series is still haunted by Austin Powers. But that's a topic for another time. EA Games sought out a developer by the name of Technics to develop a vehicle-based game to sort of be a release counterpart to The World Is Not Enough. In North America, The World Is Not Enough for the PlayStation was released on November 8th, 2000, and 007 Racing was released only 12 days later as a PlayStation exclusive. The World Is Not Enough was released in Europe on November 17th, 2000, and 007 Racing came out a month later in December. And as I stated in the last part, the PlayStation 2 was very recently out at this point. So just like with The World Is Not Enough, 007 Racing was unfortunately developed for an outdated system. I can only figure that since the PlayStation 2 was backwards compatible with PlayStation 1 games, they probably didn't have much hope for it being one of their cash cow games, rather than pooling in more money to make it for the PS2. So, enter British developer Technics, a video game company that specializes in vehicle and racing games. They were originally known as Zeppelin Games and then Merit Studios, but after 007 Racing, they went on to release a lot of licensed games, such as a handful of NASCAR games, The Fast and the Furious, Pimp My Ride, and one of the most infamously worst games of all time, Ride to Hell Retribution. I'm basing that on what I've read, I've never actually played it before. But basically, they also slapped together a licensed game in 2000 called 007 Racing. Based on the name alone, it sounds more like an arcade game that you'd see in like a Dave & Buster's than a console release. As I have also stated in prior episodes, I did not grow up with a PlayStation, and I only first bought one used around 2011. It's also around the time that I first tried this game out, and yeah, I played it once for about 10-15 minutes at the most, and then put it back in my collection to never play again. I'll explain that more as I go through it, but I at least get to give it a fair shot with a fair critique of the first couple levels this time. So what did they come up with exactly? Let's check out the back of the disc case. Pay attention 007, this is for your eyes only. Q Branch has re-engineered some of your favorite automobiles with additional gadgets and firepower. You'll need everything they've got, plus your own uncanny ability to beat the odds. The free world is depending on you. Oh, one other thing before you go 007. Try to bring them back in one piece. Yeah, okay, it's clearly Q speaking to you here, and that makes sense if it's a game revolving around just vehicles that Bond acquires, through Q. Also, note the license plate on the box art. A nice little nod to point out that they want you to know this is a PlayStation exclusive with the shape buttons. Okay, let's do this.
Now pay attention, 007. I want you to take great care of this equipment.
And you might be...
Bond. James Bond.
Will you need collision coverage?
Yes.
Fire?
Probably.
Property destruction?
Definitely.
No more foreplay.
No, 007.
Pretty stellar opening, to be honest, as it's right along the lines of the other PlayStation openings of Tomorrow Never Dies and The World Is Not Enough, with the action-packed music paired with a collage of scenes from the movies. This time it's very Q-centric, as he was the one giving Bond all of these vehicles. Pretty awesome opening, though. So let's get into the gameplay. 007 Racing features 12 levels that are actual missions like in a standard Bond game. Judging the game by the title alone, you would think it would just be like Mario Kart, but with Bond vehicles. Not the case at all. Mission 1 is called Escape to the Border and takes place in Eastern Europe. Your objectives: rescue Charisse Light, obtain Stinger missile from Courtyard, eliminate helicopter with Stinger, and jump border crossing to safety. So essentially this is a standard Bond game just without the first or third person walking around. This game takes the vehicle levels from these games and makes it only that. We're treated to the gun barrel sequence actually from the films, probably The World Is Not Enough, and then the game begins. And yeah, it's still PlayStation 1, so it has those ugly, pixelated, choppy graphics, but in my opinion is looking even worse in this opening.
Collect the Stinger missile and get out quickly.
Not Judi Dench's M briefs you on the mission and you begin while driving, what else, the Aston Martin DB5. The vehicles in this game control in the third person, which is good, as I feel like first person driving on the PS1 would be rough. Correct me if there are PS1 driving games like that, but I'd rather steer clear of those. The vehicle's health and which weapon is equipped appears in the bottom left, and there's a radar in the bottom right. Your score appears in the top right to make it feel more like a Dave & Buster's racing game. Your next objective appears on the screen, and you're off. Controls are pretty simple, really. X accelerates, square brakes and is reverse, and the L and R buttons switch and use weapons. And hey, John Cleese returns as the voice of R, so that's kinda cool.
Patience, 007. You need to ensure the target is locked before firing.
He's just like, oh, more voice acting in another Bond game? Yeah, why not? Blow up the ugly wall with your gun and find Charisse wandering around with a red circle underneath her as well as the Stinger missile. Along the way, you'll find some health and weapons laying around with Charisse throwing in a few words of caution once in a while. You'll eventually encounter a helicopter that you explode with your newfound Stinger missile, and just like that, the level's almost over. Eventually, after dodging some enemies, you'll reach the end of the level where it looks like you blow up into a helicopter, but that's not the case. You're then treated to a cutscene with better graphics and a very cliche Bondian scene of him using the Aston Martin to stop pursuing enemies, which is reminiscent of Goldfinger more than anything. So, there's the first level. Pros, the Bond theme plays. You get to experience a few things that the Aston Martin can do, I guess. Cons, just about everything else though. I know it's just the intro level, but wow, it's simply not very fun. The graphics look pretty atrocious, even though I know this is only PlayStation 1, but I mean, yikes, look at this. There are still 11 more missions to go, so we'll check out the next one to see if it has more enjoyment to it. You'll get close to a 3-minute cutscene next of Bond getting mission briefing at MI6, and I'm sorry, it's just hard to care about anything that's being said. I feel like they really tried to create a Bond-esque plot as best as they could, but knowing it results in just driving around and shooting at things makes it a bit less meaningful. It involves a threat to global stability involving NATO, and there's some hijacked freighter, and oh hey, it's Tim Bentinck returning doing his best Pierce Brosnan impression.
Someone was obviously tipped off to the freighter's location.
Actually, I think he sounds better this time around. If they can't get Pierce, at least this is a decent off-brand option. After the briefing finally ends, we see Mission 2 is called Gimme a Break, and we are now in New York City. You are to simply collect all transmitters and jettison the car into the Hudson River. You're treated to some threats by a menacing European man who tells you that your license to kill does not include Manhattan residents.
And your license to kill does not include Manhattan residents.
There's bound to be people absolutely everywhere and cars in your way, and it's going to be extremely difficult to navigate for sure. And oh, there's like 3 people walking around per block and barely any traffic. This must be like New York City, Utah or something. The level begins, and essentially it's just driving around by following the arrows that lead you to these floating green transmitters that you barrel into before a timer runs out. Repeat 12 times, yes 12, and then drive the car into the Hudson River. That's the entire level. All that briefing and build-up to just follow an arrow for a few minutes. Oh, and Jack Wade talks to you, Bond CIA ally originally from GoldenEye.
Hey, Jimmy. Looks like you're in a bit of a pickle. To get the car to Hudson Bay Harbor and jettison it in the river before she blows.
Very cool. And the same lady shouts, constantly, since that's all the New Yorkers say, of course. As for me, I'm quickly remembering why I played this game for only about 10 minutes back when I got it. Am I being too harsh on it? I mean, look at it. This really should be only an arcade game. They could have made a cool little Aston Martin thing to sit in and pretend to drive, and then I would have thought this would be a fun time killer for 50 cents. But there's just not much to this, really. The controls aren't even great, so you're left with just kind of a lame driving game. But apparently the Lotus Esprit appears in the last 2 levels, so I'll consider those levels a direct remake of The Spy Who Loved Me from 1990. Overall, no, I can't get into this one, and I'm not the only one, since reviews were pretty abysmal for the most part. The graphics are rough and the driving isn't terribly fun. This would have been a disappointing rental back in 2000 if I had a PlayStation then. But, I will say this, they actually did improve on something Over the World Is Not Enough and Tomorrow Never Dies. They included some actual multiplayer. Yeah, there's actually a 2-player mode where you drive around trying to eliminate the other players, sort of like in Mario Kart. Just replace the red shell with missiles and we're good to go. It's basically what you'd expect a Bond vehicle multiplayer game to be. There is the aforementioned challenge mode where 2 people pick a vehicle from the game and find weapons to lower the health of the other player. Then there's Pass the Bomb, which is sort of a neat addition. One person starts with a bomb ticking down in their vehicle and they must run into the other player, which will hand off the bomb, basically like a game of hot potato. There's nothing exceptional here, but at least they did implement some 2-player mode this time around. It certainly doesn't save the game from being lackluster, but I could see there's some fun to be had here. So next time, we're entering the year 2001 for the second time. Except this time, it's going to be something completely different from The World Is Not Enough, or strictly a racing game. That's right, we're finally officially entering the 6th generation of home consoles, even though they've already been out for the last couple entries. It's time to enter the age where the same game gets released for multiple consoles via third-party developers, as we see how Bond evolved to the PlayStation 2, Nintendo GameCube, and the Xbox. James Bond will return in Agent Under Fire.